The topic today is kindness, pity, and charity. And it's part of our study from the Vedanta Treatise, where we're covering the portion strength of emotion. So in the previous session, we covered love. And in this session, we cover 3 other emotions that the author has chosen. And from what we've understood so far is that emotion can elevate us, but if left unsupervised, ungoverned, it can also devastate us. So how do we approach emotion that it purifies us, elevates us, and improves our relationships? This is the trick of it. When we have thinking backing the emotion becomes mature, becomes deep. When the emotion is impulsive, is selfish, it's superficial. One of the poems that we study, and perhaps when we complete this module and there's a break between the next one, we'll cover this poem. It's called Laodamia by William Wordsworth. And it's a story about a princess, a Greek princess that is moving, has lost a husband in the Trojan War. And she mourns for the husband. And because the husband was so valiant and noble in the war, the gods allow 3 hours of the husband's spirit with the mourning wife, Laodamia. And they warn her, Laodamia, this is for your husband's good deeds. But please note, it is only for 3 hours. And the winged god Mercury brings the husband, and she rushes straight away to hold him, to hug him. But he disappears because he's a spirit. And he tries to counsel his wife. Look, I'm here. Don't mourn for me. We will be together in the afterlife, but control your passion. But she's so excited. She is so caught up in the moment of seeing her husband being reunited that she forgets it's only 3 hours. And this is what he says to her. He says, be taught, O faithful consort. This is husband to the grieving wife. Be taught, O faithful consort, to control rebellious passion. For the gods approve the depth and not the tumult of the soul. A fervent, not ungovernable love. This is it. A fervent, not ungovernable love. And unfortunately, the wife does not heed the advice. It's an ungoverned love. And when the 3 hours is up, she clings to the body. She falls at the spot where the body is leaving. She dies. And because she did not listen to the gods, she is separated from the husband. She does not meet him in heaven. There's so much of philosophy in this poem. Attachment is when we are selfish. For those who understand the passage of life and death, there's no grieving. Why? Because death is no doubt a part of life. And when we get to the section and we study it on the law of causation, we understand, in fact, for the other person, it's a promotion. Just as you may move to another country for opportunity, for promotion in your career. Similarly, you change embodiments. For what? for that which makes it easier for you to fulfill your desires and keep moving. So if it's a promotion, what are you grieving for then? We are grieving because we are attached. We miss what that person used to do for us. We miss their role in our life, their solace, their kindness to us, their support. Perhaps a patient ear at the end of a long day. We miss what they provide us. This is attachment, not love. If it's love, you will be at peace because you know the person is doing what is best for them. There cannot be confrontation. There cannot be conflict when there is love. So how do we move from attachment to love? Bring in the intellect, purify it of the selfishness. In this session, we're going to cover a few more emotions. We're going to cover kindness, pity, and charity. And these three emotions that the author has chosen, we more or less associate them as positive emotions. And this is where it's interesting, because even a positive emotion, if it's not well directed, if it's not mature, it can become a weakness. And this is where we're going to study the different facets of it. So let's begin. The first one is kindness. Kindness is one of the unique human emotions. For those of you who've not read the text, would anyone like to define it? What is kindness? And remember, there is some overlap with love, with pity, with charity. So what is its unique flavor? Its characteristic. What makes it different? Anyone? Kindness? Would you be so kind to share your view?
It's external.
External, okay.
Kindness comes when there's empathy.
When there's empathy, okay. Yes.
When we are generous.
When we are generous, okay. So you'll see how there's a little bit of love there with the empathy side, generous, there's some overlap with charity. The author differentiates it by saying, kindness is this feeling of tenderness, gentleness, a compassionate, benevolent attitude of mind. You know, it makes my hair stand on end when an author or a poet puts a quality so articulately, where they capture the spirit of the quality. And in our study of Vedanta, we're going to have many of these retreats, many of these treats, in the sense we study qualities like forgiveness. We study qualities like steadfastness, faith, some other beautiful emotions, and how well some poets capture it. For instance, William Shakespeare, he talks about mercy, and he describes mercy as the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. From the Merchant of Venice. The quality of mercy is not strained. How beautiful they put it. or forgiveness, Mark Twain defines as, forgiveness is the fragrance a violet releases as the foot crushes it. You stand on the violet. How does the violet react? It releases a fragrance. Wow. Beautiful. This kindness, which Swamiji has defined as this feeling of tenderness, gentleness, we see it sometimes. A parent with a child, that softness, that delicacy, or a moment, a tender moment between lovers. A grandchild, a grandparent. You see it very often with the disciple to a guru. How the disciple does something for the guru, even if it's just serving a plate of food. There's such a grace about it. Kindness. The beauty of these kind thoughts is how it makes you feel. There's a great peace that comes with it. And this is why it's called a spiritual quality. And it's an essential feature of religion, because only a human being can have this kindness, where you think softly, gently about the other person. In fact, one of the hallmarks of spiritual evolution is, are you kind? If you're not spiritual, you are harsh, sharp, abrasive. You don't have the selflessness to be kind, to cater, to be patient and gentle with another. Think of what's best for them. There's a section in The Idea of a University, an educational treatise by Cardinal Newman. And in this extract, he describes the qualities of a gentleman, a gentle person, a kind person. And he describes this gentleman as one who is like an easy armchair. Makes you feel, whoever the other person is, when you're in that person's company, you feel at ease, relaxed, at home. Now, it is not easy to do that. It takes a certain level of unselfishness. And this is what it's saying. How many thoughts of kindness do we have in a day? Do we have in a week? Do we have in a month? Ella Wheeler Wilcox, she says, no point going to Vedanta class, studying religion after religion, if you cannot be kind. So many gods, so many creeds, so many paths that wind and wind, while just the art of being kind is all the sad world needs. If we want to take one thing from all our learning and put it into practice, it is this: be kind. Recently, we had a youth camp, and the teenagers, they studied at the Vedanta Academy for 5 days. They studied the Bhagavad Gita, they studied some poems, they studied about how to be successful, perform a perfect action. And these sessions were taught by Siddhantaji, by the senior alumni of the academy. And the last session, the farewell session, was with Swamiji. And Swamiji finished with this message: you've heard so many things in your 5 days, but the one quality to leave with is be kind. Now, it's not easy to get kindness right. And people have mistaken acts of kindness with thoughts of kindness. And this is where you get into trouble. Because it does not always mean that when you're performing an act of kindness, that it is beneficial for the other person. And I'll explain this. In India, there is this quality of ahimsa. You've heard of this? Ahimsa? Debbie? Ahimsa it's been there for thousands of years. It's a spiritual quality. It means no harm. Himsa is harm, injury. Means non. So it's non-harm, non-injury. Not doing anyone any injury. And Mahatma Gandhi made it popular of late. The idea of no violence, no protest, no violence, no injury when you protest. Now, this was associated with kindness, means don't injure anything. Be kind, be gentle. Now, what happened is, because this quality was taken by the letter, this is how foreign invaders were allowed to come into India. Because there was a certain degree of, let us not cause any harm, no injury. This was taken advantage of, and people lost their kingdoms. Sometimes you may have to put on an act of harshness, an act of strength in order to be gentle, kind. In the play Hamlet by William Shakespeare, Hamlet says to himself, he's about to go and talk to his mother quite firmly, to reason with her, to get her to see the truth. And he says to himself before he goes, because he has to work the emotion up in himself, he says, I must be cruel only to be kind. Means your act is cruel, but why are you performing that cruel act? It is out of kindness. It is to benefit the other person. You know, as a parent or as a grandparent, you may have to discipline your child, right? How do you discipline the child? You try first with soft words, gentleness, kind acts. Darling, don't do this. Don't go by the fire. Don't put your hand on the stove. You try that first. And you can see the child is not getting the point. At some stage, you may have to resort to taking on a countenance of what? Don't do it. It is not good for you. You will burn yourself. How can you talk like that? You're supposed to be a spiritual person. Inside, you're absolutely calm. There's no harshness inside. In fact, although you're putting on a countenance of anger, you're putting on a countenance that seems harsh, it is all for the benefit of the child. Cruel only to be kind. So let us not be a victim of kindness. It is not the act of kindness that matters, but the thought of kindness. Similarly, we mentioned the Mahabharata. Why did the great warrior Arjuna, when he's just about to start the battle, he's on the side of the good cousins, the Pandavas, and when he drives up to start the battle, he's looking at the two armies. Why is he not able to fight anyone? Bhagavad Gita students.
Sorrow.
Sorrow. At what?
He took the battle personally.
How? In this context, with kindness.
Attachment.
Attachment, yes. To who? To what?
To his gurus and his cousins and the grandfather who were there in the army.
Exactly. He says, and he's quoting the scriptures. He says, how can I be unkind to my cousins, to my family? How can I inflict harm, injury on my guru who has taught me all this knowledge? And that's what it's saying. You have to be sometimes cruel only to be kind. You've tried all diplomacy, and this is where Krishna, Lord Krishna represents the intellect. And he resurrects Arjuna's mind and says, don't fall a victim to this kindness, this thought of this act of kindness. You've got to do what needs to be done for the situation. And what is the situation? What is the thought of kindness? To resurrect the country with righteousness. So sometimes you may have to go to battle with your own family. What? To resurrect righteousness. So you need a clear intellect for situations like this. But the thought behind it is kind, gentle, tender. Everyone okay with kindness? Yeah. Then we move to pity.
Sudhakar, just a small question, please.
Sure.
Later in this same Bhagavad Gita, the quality of compassion is described in chapter 12. Is it a similar thing to kindness, or is it something deeper or higher?
You could club it with kindness.
Okay.
In fact, so in this topic, and I would suggest that for those of you who don't have the book, get the book. For those of you who have the book, Vedanta Treatise, the Eternities, study this section this week, especially after our explanation, and look at how Swamiji defines kindness. So he actually uses the word, Paresh,
Compassion.
benevolent attitude of mind. So that softness, compassion. Yeah. So you can treat them as synonyms. Now pity. Pity, good quality or negative quality?
Negative. Negative.
Negative, Leela. Negative. Okay. Well, let's define it first. What is pity? The author defines it as a feeling of sympathy for the suffering of others. Leila, positive or negative?
No, it's positive.
It's positive according to this definition.
Yes, exactly.
Why would it be negative then? Because yes,
Well,
that's gone to say that it's negative. It can be negative.
Yes, because most of the time pity is not love.
But it's not love. It's an impulse of sorrow for their misfortune. It's more, and the author describes it as an immature emotion because it's not really from identification with the other person's sorrow. It is more discomfort that that person is suffering in front of you. So if you can remove the suffering, just so that it's out of sight, you want to do something immediately. And we've got to be careful of this impulse, because sometimes that band-aid help, that immediate quick fix for the situation, is not beneficial for yourself or for the other party. If you act on this impulse, so to commiserate, to sympathize with another person, can be positive, but if it is, again, not backed with maturity, if it's not backed with understanding, then it becomes weak pity. You become a victim of weak pity. You don't want to upset anybody. You don't want to hurt their feelings. It turns to be a weakness to please others. And there is no end to this. In wanting to please others. But I don't want to disappoint my family. I don't want to disappoint this person. Why? They will feel bad. Not, again, it's not that we want to upset people. It's not that we want to cause suffering to others or to disappoint people, but to what extent? When does it cross the threshold and move from kindness to weak pity? Anyone? All of you would have experienced this with family.
Oh my God.
All of you have expectations from your parents, from your children, from your partner. And we end up doing so many things to please them. When does it become weak pity? We want to feed the other person's emotion. Yes, Paresh?
I think it becomes along that spectrum that you described, Sudhakar, from kindness to pity. It becomes pity when your own attachment to constantly wanting to please the other person or people at the expense of your own emotional and mental well-being. Now it has drifted into pity.
Okay, at your expense.
Yeah.
You've heard of the term emotional blackmail,
Yes.
where a family member uses emotion, plays on your weak pity to extract from you. Maybe not as conscious or as manipulative as I'm saying it, but it's there. They prey on that weak pity. A cousin comes to you and says, look, I need money. I'm in trouble. And what is family for? That's a good question. What is family for? Is family there to pay each other's debt? Where is this family manual? All sorts of unwritten things. In certain cultures, Indian culture, Chinese culture, parents have a clear idea that their child is an investment. Their child is an investment in what? In old age care. That when they get older, they have children to look after them, keep them company. Bitterly disappointed. Did your child know that? Imagine if the fetus knew that. He said, no, I think I'll go back. Where is this contract? And yet, a child or a cousin or a partner may yield to this weak pity with the weakness of, I don't want to upset the other person. Again, what? It is not your act of kindness, it's your thought of kindness that matters. It is not being a victim of weak pity. So what do you got to do? You've got to hold your intellectual conviction. What makes sense to you and your life, you continue with. Where you can be of assistance, by all means be of assistance. But not to the extent that you compromise your values, you compromise who you are. One. And two is it really of benefit to the other person? So you want to remove that person's suffering. Why? Because it's there in front of you. Examine deeper. Why is that person suffering? How can you remove it?
No way.
Depends, because usually with emotion, you give emotion, you give assistance. Will it end there? Does it really help? And this is where it takes a great degree of thinking, maturity, and intellect. So one way of getting a hold of this impulse of pity and not allowing it to become weak pity is by understanding the law of nature. The law of nature states, anyone? What is the one law that all laws follow?
It's cause and effect.
Cause and effect. Whatever cause that you put in, you will experience the effect. If you are experiencing an effect, it's because of a cause. What that means is each of us is where we are because of what we've done in the past. If you are relatively comfortable and peaceful today, it's because of the way you lived in the past. If you are uncomfortable, unhappy, in discomfort, it's because of your past. By understanding this law of nature, you will understand that every person, including ourselves, gets what he, she deserves. You're getting what you deserve. Not that when we find a family member suffering, we're like, you got what you deserved. It's not to turn you callous, it's not to turn you insensitive, but it's an understanding. Yes, this person is there because of their past mistakes, their lack of intellect. Okay. Now, should you do anything about it? This is where you start thinking. So what it does is it counterbalances the impulse to go and help, be a hero, fix, remove the suffering. Hang on. This person is here in this situation because of what they've done in the past. What is my role? Can I be of real assistance to help that person? So for instance, we find when we used to go on trips on a train with our teacher, we would travel sometimes to different cities for lecture tours, and we'd go by train, and on the train there would be beggars. And we would find my teacher, whenever there was a beggar, he would not give any of the beggars anything. But if there was a person selling tea, selling sandwiches, he would be tipping the burgers, putting a note in their pocket. And we asked Swamiji, why is it that you give the people who are selling things and you don't give the beggars? To which he said, you don't know whether you're keeping that beggar a beggar. You are encouraging licensed beggary. You're making it a profession. So unless you can be sure how it's being used or whether it's being used correctly, do not give. There are, in some circles, we find in some parts of Mumbai, you find children begging. And when you see this young child, naturally you think about your child, or you think about your grandchild, your nephew or niece, and you feel for the child, and immediately you want to give something to the child. This is the weak pity that we're talking about. Will that money be of assistance? In some circles, children are kidnapped from homes to become part of a gang where they use children to go and beg and bring the money back. This is what we are supporting. First, do no harm. Now you feel good about yourself. What? The child was suffering, I gave it something. Is it helping the situation? A family member came to me. They were in debt. So what is my role? Oh, of course, I have to help them. I'm a great family member. I have enough wealth to dispense. So what? You give the person the wealth. And what do? They go and use it for gambling. Further debt. Are you assisting? We've got to use our intellect and say, understand the person, why are they in this dilemma? It neutralizes the emotion, means the emotion is not so strong. And then you act with what the situation demands. So again, an emotion of sympathy for another person, but let it not be a weakness where you compromise your convictions, your values, and it causes harm to the other person. This is pity. And now, the last emotion for today, charity. So from what we've covered about these thoughts of kindness and not being a victim to weak pity, it almost seems as if we're encouraging one to be insensitive. It's not that. It is about being unselfish, giving. In fact, that emotion towards others, that wanting to give and serve others, is what makes life worth living. It's what gives you happiness. You are rich by what you give, not by what you take. And there are different ways of giving. In the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about 5 types of service. So you can give materially, you can write a check, you can give a loaf of bread, you can feed people. That's one form of giving. Okay, so the first type of service is material service. And this is the beauty of Vedanta, how well it categorizes and structures every aspect of life. So even giving. So giving, you got material service, which is you part with your possessions. Then you get subtler. So what's a subtler form of giving? You part with something closer to you. So closer than material is you part with the body, physical service. You go and assist someone. Perhaps a friend is moving. You spend the weekend helping a friend pack boxes, unpack boxes. Physical service. Higher than that, you give emotions. Can anyone think of an example? How do you give emotions?
Listening to someone.
Listening to someone.
Through vibrations.
Through vibrations. What vibrations?
You feel, you kind of give happy thoughts, vibrations. Think about that person and send vibrations, happy vibrations.
How do we know they receive it?
Don't know that. You get it back. It's a saying, whatever you give out comes back to you as well.
Yeah, for sure. So we can understand easily giving materially or giving off the body. You lend a hand. And giving off emotion is, it's giving off emotion. So for instance, we mentioned, I think it was Daksha mentioned, listening to someone, allowing that person to vent. You're giving emotion there. You're sympathizing by listening. by giving somebody attention is giving emotion. Something so simple as that. Acknowledging a person is giving emotion. Asking, how are you? But meaningfully, truly. How are you doing, Smita? Genuinely asking, how are you doing? How is life? This is giving emotion. And there are some people, so beautiful to hear, they go to hospitals, they find out patients who do not have any next of kin. And they go to these patients, sometimes with a basket of goodies, maybe a balloon, and they spend the evening talking to this patient. And the patient has no idea who they are. They have no idea who this patient is. And it's just a passing of care, emotion. Beautiful. Can you give emotion? And I'm sure some of you will know how fulfilling receiving emotion can be. A small gesture, how great it can be. Yes, Usha. You have a question?
Yes, not a question, but a way of adding to what you're saying is even keeping your phone away when someone's talking to you is like giving him emotion.
Is your husband nearby? I thought you're saying that because he's nearby, he should overhear this. Yes. Just being present with the other person. Sometimes it's not saying a word at all. Perhaps, Kavita, this is what you meant. A person who's just lost someone. All right. So we're experiencing it now in our family. We've just lost a close member. And sometimes it's just sitting next to somebody who's feeling the loss. It could be putting your arm around them, or it could be just sitting next to them. And they feel it. They feel the support. They feel the identification. They feel it, emotion. Higher than that or closer than that is the intellect, where you give thoughts, ideas. So now we're giving ideas, we're giving knowledge, we're giving wisdom. And with this, it has a different impact. So from emotion, now we're giving thoughts, ideas, knowledge, wisdom. Higher than that. So you're giving knowledge. Higher than that is actually where you're giving wisdom. It's called, and see it on the screen. Okay, so we're going subtlety. It says the highest service is self-study. The highest service any of us can do, Deepak, Kiran, Ravina, the highest service we can do is to study and unfold the spirit, the self in our personality. Because when you study, you unfold the divinity within. You unfold the supreme self that you are. And when you do that, when you study, the effect is whatever unfoldment you've done, you give that percentage of self out. So if you've unfolded yourself 20%, 20% of the self of the divinity radiates to others. You don't have to give it, you are it. People benefit from that radiation, as it were. And that's why it's the highest service. Because you're not giving possessions, you're not giving physical service, you're not giving emotions or thoughts, you're actually giving truth, reality. Not by lectures, just by your presence. See, the Supreme Self is full. It's complete. The kingdom of heaven is within you. You are a king, you are rich, you are wealthy. You have everything that you need. If, or to the extent we understand this, you will feel that you have enough. You will feel that you have abundance. You have everything so you can give. And that's why charity is associated with spirituality. Because when you identify with the spirit or the self, there's a level of fullness. It manifests in the form of giving. But if you do not identify with the spirit self, you will feel incomplete, insufficient. You will want to take, but there is no limit to taking. You will always feel insufficient. It's not a question of quantum. You could have billions and feel incomplete, insufficient, insecure. You can have a handful of grain and feel that you have more than enough. It is giving that makes you happy, taking that makes you miserable. Therefore, self-study. Unveil that self, realize that self, give. It's an expression of the self. There was a saint who lived by a simple phrase. He gave, he forgave. That's all he did his whole life. He gave, and he gave, and he gave, and he forgave. Interesting thing. Gave, forgave. Forgiveness is a type of giving. How? Howard? How? How is forgiveness a type of giving?
Well, you're giving your love by forgiving,
Yes. It's very subtle. When you forgive, you allow the other person to be what their nature is. When I say allow is not the right word. You understand that the person will be what their nature, what their understanding, what their vasanas are. That understanding is forgiveness. You give that understanding. It's not even a question of, I forgive you, I'm superior, and you are the lesser person, and I'm the better person. I forgive you. Here is my blessings. No, this is not it. It's understanding. I give you my understanding. Means I get you. I see you. Beautiful. So this saint, he lived by these two phrases. He gave, he forgave. And he continued with his thinking about God. And the God that he would worship was Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva was so pleased with his single-pointed dedication, his constant prayer to Lord Shiva, that Lord Shiva himself came down. Look, this is just a story. Don't get involved. Lord Shiva came down. He's not going to come visit you. It's a story. Lord Shiva came down with his consort, Goddess Parvati. And they're there, they're looking at the saint. And at the time, the saint was doing some sewing. He was repairing one of his clothes. And Lord Shiva says, Hari Om, you have been a great worshipper of God. And for your dedication, for your worship, I grant you a boon. Ask what you want, it will be granted. To which the saint, he's thrilled to see Lord Shiva. But he replies, he says, Lord, how can I ask for anything? Because there's nothing which you've not given me. And what it highlights is the helplessness of these people who've unveiled the self. They feel like they have everything. They don't know what to ask for. They feel like they have everything. Now, if I was to ask any of you, Leila, is there anything you need?
Oh, the
We are-
list is long.
At least 3 pages. And you'll say, still there'll be ellipses, ... still adding. This saint, he doesn't know what to ask for. And Lord Shiva insists. He's very happy. He's very happy. This is a true man of renunciation. This is a true man who's understood God. But his wife, Parvati, pokes him. Give him something, give him something. So Lord Shiva says, okay, stop poking me. And he asks the disciple, Saint, dear saint, at least for my sake, please ask for a boon so I can go back to heaven. The saint says, I don't know what to ask for, but okay. And he lights up because he's looked down and he sees that he was sewing. He says, Lord, I ask, may the thread always follow my needle. Means nothing. What will the thread follow? But this is what their helplessness is. They don't know what to ask. What a state. So take the position of a giver, the idea or the attitude of Aprevu. How can I be of service? Imagine every relationship you go into. Now we look at relationships as, what can I get from you? How can I benefit from you? Imagine if you look at a relationship as an opportunity. How can I serve you? How can I be of help to you? It makes all the difference. It is not being a servant. So service doesn't make you a servant. It actually makes you a king. Why? Because you have everything. That's why you feel you can serve. Not out of a complex, not out of an inferiority complex, but out of a fullness. And this is the purity, beauty, and joy in life. It's difficult. We're so attached. We're scared of losing. We're fearful. Just try it. Experience it. Log in the reaction, how you feel afterwards. But again, remember, we're always analyzing the different facet of emotion. It should not be without the intellect. Charity without the intellect is indiscriminate charity. You've got to think before you give. So the feeling of wanting to give must be there, but you must run it through the intellect. And at times, it may be more beneficial not to give in certain scenarios. There are only 2 types of people in the world today. There's no true charity, true giving at all. Very rare. There are those who are uncharitable, say 98% of the world, uncharitable, selfish. The 2% that do charity do unintelligent charity. Means it doesn't really reach the beneficiary. It doesn't help the beneficiary. It doesn't bring about any elevation. It's a handout. It doesn't help them. We find even in some scenarios where there are hurricane-affected homes, they show pictures of so much of food that has gone there, but it hasn't been the right type of food and it's just rotting. Or so many clothes that have been sent there, but people don't need clothes at that time. They need something else. Unintelligent. Or people give to particular organization where 90% of the donations are taken by admin fees. It doesn't go to where you want them to. Unintelligent charity. What does it mean to have true charity? It's when you think what is the kind of charity that will benefit the donee to the best of your ability. And I'll give you an example from the book, and it's this. In the book, Les Miserables, the French novel by Victor Hugo, it talks about a convict who escapes from prison. He's been there for many years. And because of the cruelty in prison, becomes quite harsh, quite a mean character. And he's escaped prison and he's looking for some kind of solace at night, some kind of place where he can rest, where he can just stay and get through that stormy night. And of course, everyone in the village that he comes across shouts at him, tells him to get out. The very sight of him, they get scared. They say, go, get out of here. Except one house where a bishop is staying. He knocks on the door, and the housekeeper, she opens the door a bit, sees his face and screams, ah! And the bishop says, who is that? So there's a man. He wants a place to eat and to stay. Well, he's most welcome here. But he is most welcome here. And the housekeeper lets him in. And the bishop sees this man and he says, you look like you've had great suffering. Please wash up, be my guest, join me for a meal. And if you like, you're most welcome to stay in our guest room. And then the housekeeper starts setting the table. And the bishop says, for the guests, we use the silver plates. So she goes and she takes out the special plates, the solid silver plates, and keeps it there. The convict is watching all this, sees where she's taking the plates out of, and they have a meal together. There's no conversation. The convict is just eating as much as he can. And he decides to stay there. So he's given the bedroom. Again, the convict watches, where are the plates being kept? And the story goes, he has this conscience crisis, a crisis of conscience, where he's thinking, the convict is tossing and turning. I've met with such great kindness, but solid silver plates. And he gets up in the middle of the night, takes the plates and runs off. The next morning, there's a knock on the bishop's door. And it's the police. And the bishop lets them in, and the police come in, and the police throw the convict on the floor. They say, Bishop, we found this man with your plates. We recognize them because when we eat with you, we have these plates. And you know what the bishop does? He says, my dear policeman, why have you done this? He didn't steal the plates. I gave him the plates. And the police apologized and they left. And this convict is trembling. He can't believe it. Why would you do this? The priest goes to his mantelpiece, and he takes 2 solid silver candlestick stands. And he presents it to the convict and says, my son, life is to give, not to take. And the story goes, the convict leaves with the plates and the solid silver candlestick stands. And he not only changes himself, but he becomes a giver. He becomes a prosperous person that is helping others. This is true charity. That one act by the bishop transforms a person. Now, how many acts of charity can we claim to have done? To have elevated, benefited, transformed another person. This is true charity. This is what we should aim towards. Life is to give, not to take. The beauty is, it benefits the donee, but it also benefits the donor. the one who gives. And I'm not sure whether I should say this point because it might spoil your giving, but those who give get returns in abundance. The way to gain anything is to lose it. If you want to be successful, to prosper, then give. You will get so much back in return. The problem is, if you give with the idea of gaining, sorry, it doesn't work. But then why am I telling you this? Because it's true. The more you give, the more you get. It's almost as if there's a high pressure to low pressure. As soon as you give, it comes and it fills the space. I've experienced it in my own life. I've experienced it having watched Swamiji over decades. It's almost as if the earning cannot keep up with the giving. Beautiful. So what do we need to do? When it comes to charity, it is not so much the objective dispensation. So it's not about the physical giving. It's not about the expression, but it is about the subjective mental disposition to give, to serve. This is called social consciousness. It's being socially conscious of those around you. Which is what? Wanting to serve, wanting to understand and recognize the needs of others around you. This is true charity. And it starts at home. This should be taught in primary schools. What the world lacks today is not the lack of social workers. And social work is good. There is a difference though. Social work must continue. But what we lack today is social consciousness. The world has enough resources for everyone to be taken care of, but it does not have enough for our selfishness. There's enough for the world's need, but not for our greed. It is selfishness and the exploitation of those who have less that is causing the poverty of the world today. And how are we trying to treat it? With pity, weak pity, band-aids. Feed this village, give electricity here, stick, stick, stick. And no doubt this is noble work and it should continue, but not at the expense of social consciousness. Because if we teach social consciousness, suppose in primary schools, we're teaching about giving, just as we've learned today. It should benefit the donee, it should benefit the donor, it should be thought out, intelligent. Then what you're doing is you're creating unselfish, socially conscious people. If each of us looks after our own circle around us, the whole world will be taken care of. Our academy is designed for knowledge. And yet, because we practice from where we are, we have built 37 houses, plots and houses for our workers. We've got 10 more houses in the pipeline. The workers' children have all been educated. They're now engineers. Imagine people who are gardeners, who are kitchen staff, their children are going to engineering colleges, accounting colleges. How many families benefit? If each one takes care of our circle, just by recognizing the needs of others, the people in your life, your postman, the person who comes to clean your car, to clean your home. If you recognize the needs of those, if each of us does this, there will not be any poverty in the world. Oliver Goldsmith says, all the nakedness, means the poverty, all the nakedness of this indigent world can be clothed by the trimmings from the vein. The nakedness of the indigent world may be clothed from the trimmings of the vein. It's not even asking you to do charity. It's saying part with your excess. That's enough. But to do that, we need to recognize the needs of others. And this is charity. So social consciousness is about teaching unselfishness. And whilst social work must go on, it has no meaning unless we are creating social workers through education of social consciousness. So social work, it takes care of specific areas. But if we want it to be solved completely, we need to do it exponentially. So I speak to you, 20 of us here. Suppose you go and pass it on. So the 20 people pass it on to 2 others, and we keep spreading it. Social consciousness can take care of the world. And that's why the world needs this education. So we'll close there. Life is to give, not to take. And we'll continue next week with the last session. It's going to be quite a bit of content about how to relate and express our emotions, and also where do emotions come from, understanding that. So we've got an interesting session ahead of us next week. All right, so before we part, yes, Paresh.
Sudhakar, coming back to social consciousness and charity, a real life practical question, which is a bit of a moral dilemma. If you are an intermediary, say with a foundation or a trust that receives donations that you pass on to good causes that need it, be it education or nutrition, how do we get around this problem of judging where the source of that donation has come from? So to put it in the crudest sense, suppose someone you know is a criminal, comes and gives you money to your trust. You say, use this to educate these children. Should we judge that donation? And perhaps the other question is, do we even have the right to judge that donation?
You do. Because on one hand, you're encouraging activity that is taking from others. So someone is suffering on the result of that criminal activity. So it is canceling what you're doing. So it has no meaning where you're taking from and causing suffering to some and feeding others. So
now it gets a little bit more subtle. A corporate gives a donation or a business or a businessman, and it looks fine on the surface of it. But really, we don't know the ethics and morality of that person's wealth. Now, how do we get around this issue? Because, you know, as a trust or a foundation, you're an intermediary, and you do have these moral questions, not only that you ask yourself, but sometimes they're asked of you.
So these are important questions, and you have to do your due diligence. So for instance, even when donations were given to Swamiji to build the academy, Swamiji would find out the affordability of the donor. Can the donor afford this donation? Because sometimes they give emotionally. They say, oh, Swamiji or Sudhakar, you're doing such wonderful work, such great knowledge. I want to be a part of this. And the person gives emotionally beyond their means, to which he finds out. So Swamiji will do the due diligence and say, hey, hang on. Can you afford this? You're a professional. And either the person says, yes, I budgeted for this, or the person says, yes, Swamiji, maybe I may have overshot. He says, no, keep it. In some cases, torn the check. He says, no, not now. First, you clear your debt, then we'll talk about giving. So this is the due diligence that's required. So a lot of intellect in receiving, a lot of intellect in giving. We continue next week. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sudhakar.
Thank you, Sudhakar. Hari Om. Hari Om.
Bye.
Thank you.